It seems that a lot of the people who watch my videos frequently make custom structure data packs, and while I have absolutely no clue why, I recently had the idea to make something that would help those of you making structure data packs actually put together your structures in creative mode. So let me set the scene a little bit first. I'm currently working on a structure data pack as part of a big team that I can't really say that much about right now, but this interesting looking thing right here that I've got spawned in is actually one of the pieces for one of the huge structures that's going to spawn in this pack. It was built by my friend Gekka, and her intention when she made this was that this giant structure was going to be part of a snaking hallway that is tunneling underground. So you'll never actually see this on the surface, it will cut through the earth and you'll be walking through these hallways. Now I'm in charge of actually implementing this logic, and as those of you who regularly make structure packs may have already guessed, what I need to add to this structure is structure voids. I'm going to turn invisible blocks on in the structure block, and it may get a little bit laggy, but we can see all the air in this build, and you'll realize that if I were to save this structure as it is right now with all of this air, well, this is a structure that spawns underground, so whenever it spawns, it would actually be carving this gigantic box of air out every single time it spawns. We don't want that, so we fix that using structure voids. And here is where my data pack comes in. Now normally how I would add structure voids to something like this is to go into the structure block and look at the dimensions, and then I would stand in the corner and run a fill command to fill this entire thing with voids. However, I've made a much easier way to do that. All I have to do is take any blaze rod, click on this structure block, and it will say I selected the block, and there's some particles that appear. Now that I have selected this block, there's a whole bunch of commands available to me that can just affect the contents of this box without me having to worry about the math and numbers of it at all. So first, this data pack is called structure block tools. So I can just type /function sb tools, and then I have a bunch of commands here that I can use. The first one I'm going to show is replace fill voids, and if I just run replace fill voids, then every block of air in this structure will instantly turn into a structure void. And with invisible blocks on, the structure voids are denoted by these little pink boxes. Now, for most structures, that might be all I need to do. However, for this one, it's not quite sufficient. As you may already know, structure voids basically just say that whenever this structure gets placed down, any block that was a structure void is now just whatever block was naturally there in the terrain before the structure was even placed. And for a structure like this, every single block of air being turned into a structure void is not good, because if we look inside these hallways, whenever this structure gets placed, all of these structure voids are also going to be terrain blocks, so they're probably going to be like stone and deep slate and whatever else might be underground. That's not good. We want this hallway to be hollow so that the player can actually walk through it. So clearly that first command that I just ran was not exactly what I wanted to do, and fortunately there is an easy way for me to undo it. If I just type /function, again, sb tools, and before I typed replace fill air, but I can also just type replace fill. However, I can't just run this command as it is, because replace fill is actually a macro, so I have to give it some parameters. And here's the parameters I'm going to give it. I'm going to say fill air, and then replace structure void. So this is basically telling it that anywhere inside this bounding box, wherever it finds a structure void, just replace that block with air. So if I run this command, it'll all turn back into air. So now I'm left with a little bit of a tricky dilemma, because I have this problem where I want all of the blocks on the outside of the structure to be structure voids, and none of the blocks on the inside. If I want the player to actually be able to walk through these hallways, I need to have all of these air blocks saved as air blocks. Now without this data pack, one way I could do that is just run some janky fill commands and hope that they don't overlap with the inside. I'd have to run a lot of them, I'd have to do quite a bit of mental math, and it would take a long time. Or if I really wanted to torture myself, I could just manually place every single structure void by hand, and I'm not going to do that. And this is actually the problem that inspired me to make this data pack in the first place, because I have a function that's going to solve my problem with just one command. And that command is dynamic fill. So if I type /function sb tools and then dynamic fill voids is what I want here. Well, if I press enter, it won't work because I'm not standing inside the bounding box. How dynamic fill works is that if you are at the location of an air block and you tell it to dynamic fill with voids, then from that point, it will start branching out and fill every single consecutive air block with a structure void. And it won't actually go outside the bounding box of the structure block. In this particular structure, the implication of that is that all these air blocks on the outside, since they're all touching each other, will be turned into voids. But there's no way to get from the outside to the inside without leaving the bounding box, so the hallway will be left as air. Now that's a lot of talking, so I'm just going to do it, and then I am just going to show you what it looks like, and it actually looks really, really cool. So you can see the voids are all spreading out, they're going over there, And there we go. The outside has completely turned into voids, and the hallways are still just air blocks. Like I said, this is the number one reason I made this pack in the first place. And it was only after I made that function that I then realized that this pack is actually really nice for just selecting a structure block and then being able to do whatever you like inside the bounding box. There is one last command that I added, and that is total fill. So this is basically what I can do if I just want to completely clear the structure bounding box, maybe just start from scratch. So if I do total fill air, then it will just delete the entire structure and everything will be air. Gekka, if you're watching this, don't worry, I didn't delete your build, this was a copy. I just loaded the structure back in and I turned invisible blocks off because there are a few other things I want to show off. The three main functions, replace fill, dynamic fill, and total fill, all have a macro form. And using that macro form, you can fill and replace whatever blocks you like. These other functions called replace fill voids and replace fill water are just little shortcuts, so you don't have to type out the macro every time. But by typing out the macro, you can place anything with anything else. So if I wanted to fill in lime wool and I wanted that to replace bedrock, well, I could just do that. And there we go, all the bedrock turned into lime wool. I can also do a total fill macro, and this one only takes one parameter, which is just fill, and I can just tell it to fill with whatever I want. So if I wanted this to be, I don't know, blue glazed terracotta, well, I spelled it wrong, never mind. So if I wanted this to be blue glazed terracotta, then I can just do that, and the entire box is now solid blue glazed terracotta. Now remember, the only reason the Datapack knows where to fill these things is because I selected the structure block. The primary way to do that is to click on it with a blaze rod, but if you don't want to do that, you can also just stand on top of the block and type /function sbtools select structure block. So if I'm standing on the block and I just run this command, then that achieves exactly the same thing. Now if I don't want to be able to edit this anymore, if I'm like afraid of the commands I'm running and I want to safely deselect the block, well, there's also a function for that. I can just deselect the structure block like that. And if I wanted to start editing another one, I could just repeat the process all over again, and you get the idea. And yeah, I think that's about going to do it. If you want to get this Datapack for yourself, it is available to download in the video description. I'm actually currently developing it for 1.20.6 because that is what this build server is on. We're a little bit outdated, but I have included a version that works in 1.21 as well. Thank you so much for watching. Happy structure building, and I will see you later, my dudes.